And welcome back. The Fortune Society is nationally recognized for developing model programs, helping people with criminal justice histories to be assets to their communities. Now, the Fortune Society, David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy, recently unveiled the organization's 2023 legislative priorities, calling on city and state lawmakers to remove discriminatory barriers for people with criminal justice involvement, as well as expanding access to legal services and protections for people with conviction histories and improving conditions inside jails as well as prisons. Join me now. We've got the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the Fortune Society, Stanley Richards. And thank you, Stanley, for coming to share with us. And you told us a little off camera that you are just coming off the loss of your father-in-law. And we certainly want to thank you publicly for taking the time to share with us in the midst of grief and pain. Certainly thank you for being with us, and our condolences to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the condolences. I think about the blessings of life, and my father-in-law was one of those blessings for my wife and myself. So I'm glad to be here to continue this conversation around criminal justice reform and what we can do as a city and a state and a nation to really reduce the collateral consequences of a conviction and disproportionately impacting so many black and brown people throughout the United States. We can and must do better. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well, let's dive right into it because we can do better. And I think when we talk about restorative justice, it doesn't always go well, particularly for those in communities of color. You've been at the forefront of really a lot of policy and lobbying to make sure that things can get better. When we look at the state of reform and how we deal with the criminal justice system and also our jails, I mean, what do you see give us your assessment for how you see things citywide?
I think for me, it's sort of a two-pronged approach and view. One, taking a step back and really looking at how much progress we have made over the years. And I think that continues to feed the fuel of our passion and hope that we can have a better society when we create conditions both for those who are incarcerated and conditions in our communities where our communities are safe and they're not disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration. And so when you look over the decades in New York State, particularly, we have done significant work in reducing our footprint in incarceration. In New York City jails, we went from at our peak 22,000 people incarcerated in our New York City jails. We're down now to 5,900. We've gotten much lower. We're starting to tick our way back up, which is troubling for us. And in New York State, we was at 72,000 people, and we're around 33,000 right now. And so we've seen significant reductions in our footprint, and that gives great motivation and hope that we can do better. And what Fortune Society has been talking about, what we're advocating for in some of the policies is now that we have begun to shrunk our footprint on mass incarceration and at the same time seeing safe communities. We're seeing an uptick in crime over the last year or so. But overall, we have seen a significant reduction in our crime as we've seen a reduction in our mass incarceration. So we know we can have fewer people incarcerated and we can have safe communities.
You
And so now we've turned our attention to the policies surrounding the collateral consequences of a conviction.
And for yourself, I mean, we talk around the city a lot about what's going on, and it looks like crime is going up in certain areas, and we know we have our challenges right here in the borough of the Bronx. But when you do look at it on an overall perspective, crime is going down, right? And you have incarcerations that are going down, and some things are working. So when we can talk about what's working, what can we put our hand on to say, hey, this is really something we should be paying attention to?
Well, we know it, right? We know that providing economic opportunities for people impacted by mass incarceration is a vehicle for helping people to rebuild their lives, re-engage with their communities, and support their communities. We know providing higher education in jails and in prison, and providing access to higher education when people come home is a pathway for people to build brighter futures. We know that when we provide stable, supportive housing for people who are impacted by incarceration, we know we provide them an opportunity to reunite with family, integrate into the communities, and have a safe place to live. There are sort of the pillars of what it takes to help people rebuild their lives post incarceration, and how do we develop enough supportive on off ramps so that we don't have to have so many people incarcerated. And that's one of the things Fortune Society does. We have multiple programs. We have alternatives to incarceration. We have reentry supportive housing. We have education and employment. We have licensed substance abuse treatment and mental health treatment, giving people the kind of tools and resources they need to rebuild their lives. What we have lacked, I think, in the city, in the state, and in this country is a commitment to see those kinds of services through in a very robust way. What we try to do and what we tend to do is to look at the problem and invest a nickel in the problem and expect the problem to be addressed. And the same way we've invested billions of dollars, billions of dollars in this country to build prisons and jails, we need to likewise invest significant resources in reentry housing, in substance abuse and mental health treatment, in employment opportunities, and in housing.
Yeah. Talk to me about housing because when I think about incarcerated individuals, what the goal is really for them to be able to not get into this area of called recidivism. And we know that recidivism is something that is happening and we want to try to curb that. But many times when you talk to a lot of those who've been incarcerated, they'll tell you that recidivism occurs when I can't get the opportunity to change where I live, my environment. And so that housing is so critical, right? And so can you give us a little insight into some of the barriers? Because when I think about those who are incarcerated, yeah, if I'm trying to get an apartment, if I'm trying to get a house, here it is. I'm trying to get it, but then I got to fill out this form, and that background check can be the biggest problem for me being able to land safely.
That's right. And that's true in housing and in employment. We see people with convictions discriminated against just because they have the conviction. There is this sense that if you have a conviction that you're going to be a troubled tenant, that you're not going to make a good employee, that somehow that incident in your life determines who you are as a person, as a tenant, or as an employee. And so we have been advocating for the fair chance for housing legislation that basically prohibits landlords from discriminating against people based solely on their conviction. And we've built it in such a way that landlords can still follow the law in terms of their ability to view if someone has a sex offense, but that for someone with a conviction, overall, they can't use that conviction to discriminate against someone. And that opens up existing housing opportunities for people with convictions who have a job, who want to find, need a place to live and is looking for that particular place to live, but can't get access to it because when they fill out the application, the landlord does the background check. They see 10 years ago they was convicted of a burglary or a robbery or an assault. And then that becomes who they are when they have long paid their price, paid their dues, and now they have reintegrated and they're looking for an opportunity to start a new life.
Talk to me about Clean Slate New York, and that goes in line with what we're talking about. So make us aware.
Absolutely. Clean slate is something I think we absolutely need to do. Clean slate provides an opportunity for people who have been convicted and they serve their time and they're no longer on parole to have their record automatically sealed. And it provides people like me who have a conviction can get their record automatically sealed after a certain period of time. You're off parole, you have no new arrests, no new convictions, that it would automatically be sealed from the general public. And there are some exclusions, right? Like law enforcement, the courts, and those systems will still have access to the record, but it just gets automatically sealed. And then it's 1 year for a misdemeanor, it's 3 years for a felony, and then there's an automatic expungement after 5 years for a misdemeanor, 7 years for a felony, that provides further protections. And it makes sense. I'll give you an example for me. I was released in 1991. I haven't had an arrest or conviction since then. I've been the first deputy commissioner of the New York City Department of Corrections. I've been appointed to numerous boards from city government and New York City Board of Corrections. I'm the deputy CEO of Fortune Society. My record is still available. If I apply for an apartment, if I apply for a job, an employer could do a background check and we'll see. My conviction happened in 1980. My last conviction happened in 1986. I got released in 1991, but that's still available. And when is enough enough? I have demonstrated my rehabilitation. I have demonstrated my commitment to being an asset to my community and to my city and to my state. That should I still be viewed as the person who was convicted in 1986 and served my time, successfully completed probation, and was the highest, second highest ranking correction official in one of the country's largest jails? There comes a time where we just have to say people have paid their dues and they deserve a second chance. And the clean slate does that automatically.
Yeah. I want to talk something that's near and dear to a lot of us around here, and that's close Rikers Island. We know Rikers has been a challenge for so many years. The cries have gone out for so many years, and it seems as though we're a little bit closer than we've ever been before to the close Rikers Island movement. For somebody with boots on the ground, give us where we are today and what we can expect.
Well, we are still pushing for the closure of Rikers Island. The mayor said, it's the law. Rikers needs to close by 2027. But we're not seeing all of the indicators moving in the right way. One being the population. We're seeing the population go up. As I said, it's roughly around 5,900 right now. We need to get that population down to 3,300, 3,500 in order to um, be able to close Rikers and move people to the borough-based jail system. Here's a simple fact about Rikers. Rikers is a place that is a stain on this city. It hurts those who are incarcerated there. It hurts the officers who work there and the civilians who work there. It hurts the families who have to come there. And it is time for us to close that. I firmly believe that we can have a smaller footprint uh, where only those who are absolutely necessary for us to keep our community safe to need to get their adjudicated cases adjudicated, and we can do that with a much smaller footprint. That the facilities we have could be centered on the humanity of everybody who's in there, those who are detained there, those who work there, and those who have to visit. And right now, we don't have that. We have a system that just permeates hurt, dysfunction, isolation, confusion, hopelessness, and it does massive damage to all.
Yeah.
There are no winners with our current Rikers Island system. There are no winners.
Yeah, it's quite infuriating to a lot of people. We will continue to follow that story as it develops here at our station as well. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to get an opportunity to let you share how people can partner in some of the great work that you're doing in raising awareness and advocacy.
Thank you. They can come and join us. They can come see our work. Visit our website, www.fortunesociety.org. Look at our policy work. We are often pulling together community organizing events. We are willing to come to churches and communities to share what we're doing on a policy level. We want people to join with us because we want to lead with the love of what we see in front of us. One of our sayings at Fortune is, we don't see you for what you did or how much time you served. We see you for who you are when you walk through our doors. And our job is to hold who you can be until you begin to see it for yourself, you begin to believe it, and you begin to live it. And so we invite communities to come join us in centering our work on that kind of humanity. We believe that we can have a much better society and communities and system when we work together to build a system that holds people accountable, is centered on humanity, and has procedural fairness and procedural justice.
Well, Stanley, we want to thank you so much for being with us and sharing a lot of information. The Fortune Society does some great work, and glad to get you here on the show. And thank you again for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.